Whoa there, Adaptation. Don't go installing yourself in all of my builds just yet. Let's get to know each other a little first. Adaptation is one of the new mods introduced in Arbitrations, the elite alerts you unlock after clearing every node in the star chart. It gives you stacking damage resistance to any damage type you're hit by, kind of like sentient damage adaptation, but you get the damage reduction in pieces and each stack has a duration. That's right, you can get multiple damage resistances at once. The base duration is long, but nothing about this mod is affected by Warframe ability stats, so that's what you've got to work with. If you take chip damage of a given type every 20 seconds or less, you're gonna have 90% damage reduction to that type forever. But that's still not enough information to know if this mod is really good. I mean, we all vaguely know that 90% damage reduction is going to be somewhat good, because that's the same damage reduction given by 2,700 armor. 2,700 additive armor from one mod would obviously be good, but that's not exactly what this does. It's kind of better and kind of worse. Well, but it's mostly better. Behold, it works on shields. Glorious. Taking damage to your shields will charge it, and it reduces damage dealt to your shields as well as your health, unlike armor. Although Warframe is pretty inconsistent at times, it's true that most forms of damage reduction besides armor do affect shields, so this isn't a huge surprise, but it is hugely important, because adaptation doesn't necessarily rely on any specific Warframe stat in order to make your frame tanky. You can use it and work with whatever you have, and if you have the ability to get enough effective health to give yourself time to charge up those damage resistances, you too, Warframe, can have 90% damage reduction to everything, sort of. And again, my point is that that's not necessarily the case with, say, armor. So I could run 2 Arcane Guardian sets and give any frame I like 1,200-ish armor, plus their base armor, and that's around 80% damage reduction, but it only applies to health. It doesn't apply to shields, meaning your frame has to have high base health specifically for it to work. And most of the frames looking for help with survivability have a lot of shields, but not a lot of health. And even better for adaptation, there's the static overshield cap of 1200 to consider. Every frame can just get 1200 overshields if they have a way to generate overshields. So if your frame can generate overshields reliably, like Harrow here can, then you basically just have a free health pool of 1200 without investing any mods. I could take off my redirection here, and I just have 1200 plus 4, so I have 1650 plus my health, so almost 2000 effective health that I can use to charge up my adaptation. And again, normally the drawback of using shields or overshields is that they're not affected by armor, but they are affected by adaptation. So 1200 overshields with 90% damage reduction for a total of 12,000 effective health for one mod slot is pretty adequate, and Harrow even has his passive, which doubles his overshield capacity, so I'm just saying. Not bad. But you do need some form of effective health. You need some critical mass of effective health somewhere to get any use out of adaptation. So generally speaking, this isn't going to make, say, Loki very tanky, because he has terrible base health and shields, and he doesn't have any way in his kit to generate overshields. If you absolutely must do this, you can use my Rakta Dark Dagger build, which will just barely consistently sustain overshields, and the Rakta Dark Dagger is almost certainly going to be buffed during Melee 3.0 since it has such atrocious supplemental stats, but you get the point. It's not like this is literally just 90% damage reduction that you can put on any frame, because you need to have something to tank through while you build up the damage reduction. You have to get hit for 100% of whatever damage, and then 90% of whatever damage, and then 80% of whatever damage, and etc. to build up the full stack of damage reduction, and Loki's not going to survive that. I mean, nor does he need to. He can just turn invisible, but the point is, you can't just slap it on every single frame and become tanky all the time. Still, all of that's not even mentioning the fact that adaptation is going to interact favorably with other forms of damage reduction. They're all separate from each other, so if you have, say, Mesa's Shatter Shield at its defensive cap of 95% damage reduction, and you also had adaptation stacked up to 90% for whatever relevant damage types you're taking, you're going to take 0.5%, just 1/200th of incoming damage. And I know, believe me, it's like, what does that even mean at this point? So imagine that a shot that would have downed you instantly with no defenses would now have to hit you 200 times to down you. That is so unnecessary, but it is very tanky. And Mesa does have base armor, not very much, but she does have some. Even if you don't run a set of Arcane Guardian to reach another 70%-ish damage reduction on top of all of that, You get to a point where spending more space in your build on damage reduction just doesn't do all that much because you're taking an irrelevantly small amount of damage already. So with all of this established, we've gotten to know this rosy-cheeked transfer student called Adaptation pretty well at this point. Let's talk about where to use it. Basically, the extreme ends of the tankiness spectrum aren't going to work so well. A total paper bag like Loki just has no way to build up that damage reduction, nor any need for it since he can just stealth. And likewise, a living tectonic plate like Nidus doesn't necessarily need it, since he can already achieve relatively high armor and also has another form of damage reduction from Parasitic Link. While I can see it being considered a choice on Nidus, it's not like it's bad on Nidus, it's going to be strongest on frames that are struggling with limited sources of damage reduction, yet have meaningful defensive stats somewhere. It can push not enoughs to the point where they have enough damage reduction to stay alive consistently in most content. This means we're looking at frames like, say, Oberon, who can achieve moderate armor from multiple sources. He could run some Arcane Guardian, he can get it from Hallowed Ground and Renewal interacting and giving him a pretty hefty bit there, but he has no other source of damage reduction. He's going to survive a few hits on his own, but he's not quite there, so Adaptation makes a huge difference. Better still, Oberon can sustain his own health with his Renewal while he takes larger spikes of damage to stack up Adaptation, and he could even use Phoenix Renewal so he can save himself if he gets initially overwhelmed. Normally that's not very good because the cooldown on Phoenix Renewal is so long, and you'll probably just die again in that time, but with Adaptation, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.